March 23rd, 2026. Guys, I want to talk about a few things here. It has to do with the war in Iran. And this morning, I talked about how would Israel respond if once Trump called this 5-day ceasefire. Would they try to escalate the conflict to keep everyone involved, or would they back off a little bit too? Well, they did pretty much as expected. It says airstrikes on Tehran. The Israeli military launched a wide-scale wave of strikes targeting Iranian infrastructure in Tehran early Monday morning. Large parts of the capital are currently without power, going exactly against what Trump was trying to set up. And again, there are those that are in Jerusalem that claim to be Jews but are not and are the synagogue of Satan. I hope you're understanding this. And we're still getting mixed information here. And I think it may be because, I think maybe a week ago, reports were coming out that there may be a division within the ranks in Iran itself. You may have the military running one side and what's left of the mullah regime running another side. We don't really know, because what we're, again, getting conflicts here. They're saying Trump announced this 5-day postponement of planned strikes on Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure. This followed his weekend ultimatum to obliterate these facilities if Iran did not reopen the straits. Now, they're saying, or Iran is saying, that they have not had these talks. And the reports that Trump are talking about are coming from Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. And they said they have achieved major points of agreement. So again, I think there may be two entities in Iran that are trying to control things. Maybe wrong, we'll see. Now, I want to back up and go into history. This is very recent history, by the way, on an overall scale of time, about two different events. And this is about the reestablishment of Israel. And like I've said before, the plan came into the UN in 1947, but in 48 it was pretty much established. But it was driven by a combination of a humanitarian crisis, shifting global power dynamics, and local exhaustion. Despite the widespread recognition that it would lead to immediate conflict, many nations were against this. Now, there were already Jewish people there, and it was basically a British colony at this point. But Britain's, their luck was starting to kind of run out on their worldwide conquest, and they were having to back away from some of these places. So what the UN had recognized was that if Britain leaves before this point we're looking at, then the Jewish people would be left, the ones that are there, and it was a small group, it was mostly along the coastline, but they would be left without any protection at all. So when the UN got together in different meetings and so on and so forth, and got this establishment going on there, and they did it as a way and under the guise of protecting innocent civilians. But guys, it goes deeper than that in some cases, and we're going to look at the two different historical events that occurred around this same time. But the key reason for the establishment was the post-war refugee crisis after World War II, and we saw the horrors of what the Germans did to the Jews in the concentration camps and so forth. And when I say Jews, and we're talking about synagogue of Satan, guys, Christ didn't say the Jews were of the synagogue. He said there are those that are claimed to be Jews, but are of the synagogue. We see that in the leadership. Again, the post-war refugee crisis. After the Holocaust, approximately 250,000 Jewish displaced persons were living in camps in Europe. Most refused to return to their former homes due to persistent anti-Semitism and trauma, and many Western nations were unwilling to accept them. Establishing a Jewish state was seen as the only other way, and that's kind of how the UN and they all got together and did this. But it was a plan that was a few years older than this. Now, as I read through this section of the history, guys, there should be key words that triggers your memory about what I'm going to talk about the other historical event and how they tie together. British exhaustion. It says Great Britain, facing economic ruin after World War II and intense pressure from both Jewish and Arab militias, decided it could no longer commit resources to maintaining the mandate. In other words, Israel. They turned the problem over to the newly formed UN in 1947 to wash their hands of a hopeless situation. This is how the world saw this. Guys, 47 and 48 is not that long ago. Probably some of you guys in here are a little older than me, were alive then. But anyway, this is current, modern day history. And they're talking about Cold War geopolitics. Both the U.S. and the Soviet Union supported the partition of Palestine, albeit for different reasons. The U.S. saw a potential democratic ally, while the Soviets hoped to destabilize British imperial influence in the Middle East. There was moral and political pressure also. It says the horror of the Holocaust swayed international public opinion, creating a sense of moral sympathy and belief that Jews were entitled to a safe haven. Same thing they're doing now, that they've been doing. Send the money there. U.S. Christians, send your money there, but the Christians never get it. They get persecuted and beat down. Very few Christians live there anymore, by the way. But President Harry Truman also faced significant domestic political pressure to support a Jewish state ahead of the 48 elections. I wonder where that political pressure came from. Think about it. We're talking about the synagogue of Satan, guys, and the people that were under that synagogue, both in Rome and worldwide. Now, think about this. The international community was well aware that conflict was inevitable. This should be ringing some bells, guys. It was called the predicted war. Arab rejection. Palestinian, Arab, and neighboring Arab leaders explicitly rejected the UN partition plan, viewing it as a continuation of European colonizations. Again, Britain was there. The machine of independence. Many diplomats at that time felt the situation had reached a point to where there was no alternative. The British were leaving, and no international forces existed to stop the brewing civil war. Immediate invasion. True to the predictions on the day Israel declared independence, May 14, 1948, it was immediately invaded by 5 Arab armies, sparking the first Arab-Israeli war. On that day, guys, 5 armies. You don't think it was planned? You don't think it was planned for the great reset that we're about to see globally? To set it all up? Stay tuned, we're getting there. Now, the year before they really got the plan really in place and started was 46. In the green areas here was Palestinian land. In the yellow sections was Jewish land. Remember, I said mostly along the coast, but you had some very close to the West Bank, and a lot of this was going really down into Egyptian territory. But the 1947 UN plan, this is what they drew up to give Israelites more land in the yellow area here, and all the way down through here. Think about that. And then the green area would be Palestinian land where Jerusalem is. By 1967, this is what was left. You had Gaza and the West Bank. Today, very little of any of that exists today. Here's Gaza, but it's mostly bombed out. The West Bank, they push Christian citizens in there to be cannon fodder for whatever happens. But there's a big difference in 46 and today. And again, they knew this was going to create the situation we're seeing today, not just that 5-army war and other wars that have come up, 67 other wars, but what's about to happen. Now, do you realize that this is the first time that Israel and Iran have attacked each other directly? It's always been Iranian proxies until now. Did you know that was predicted? And according to the UN plan, again in 47, it says the Jewish state was allocated approximately 55 to 56% of mandatory Palestine, including the Negev Desert, the coastal plain, and parts of Galilee. The Arab state was allocated approximately 43 to 45% of the land, including the Central Highlands, Judea and Samaria, Western Galilee, and the Gaza Strip. Jerusalem was designated as a corpus separatum. Guys, that's an international zone under UN administration. In other words, the UN took up the protection of this place. Now, here's the other part of history I want to talk about, and it has to do with the Albert Pike letter. Now, there's been a lot of information out that this letter kind of grew. In other words, we had part 1 and part 2, or World War I and World War II. And then later on, after World War II, maybe the same group added World War III. I have no way to prove it or disprove it. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when it was written or who it was written by. It was the intent of the letter, and it shows you how all of this was planned. The UN, the inevitable war, all of it. But it says the famous letter from Albert Pike to Giuseppe Mazzini, dated 1871, is a cornerstone of many conspiracy theories, specifically because it allegedly predicted 3 world wars to reshape the global order. In the contents of the current conflict with Iran, the Third World War section of that letter is what people often point to, and here's how it ties in. It's the prediction of World War III. The letter describes the Third War as sparked by a conflict between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. It claims the war will be conducted in such a way that the two will mutually destroy each other. Now, don't read past this, because it says the political Zionists, we know who they are, but the leaders of the Islamic world are not the Houthis. It's not Hamas. It's not Hezbollah. It is Iran and the mullahs. So this is the first time that it's been a direct conflict like that. And what are we seeing? Again, this was how World War III would start. It's almost like the people that were in charge, whether it was the Illuminati, the Masons, it doesn't matter. There was one plan, and it was put forth by 2 different events, probably by the same group of people. And again, it's for a global reset. So again, we've got the Islamic leaders, not the proxies. It claims a war will be conducted again in such a way that the two will mutually destroy each other. And think about it, guys, they're hitting each other's nuclear plants. If they take out the desalination plants right now, it's going to be a mess. But in other words, they are firing back and forth. And again, I think the U.S. is starting to grow a little bit weary of the overstepping of Israel, and they may be left on their own very quickly. Now, the goal of all of this, in the letter, it suggests the chaos from this war would lead to global exhaustion. Now, are you catching my part about the key words? Eventually forcing humanity to accept a single universal manifestation of a new belief system or world government. Now, let's look at these 3 prophecies, or the prophecy of the 3 world wars, put it that way. It says that World War I is intended to overthrow the Russian czars and transform Russia into a stronghold of communism. It worked. World War II, designed to destroy fascism and enable the creation of a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. Why? Because they knew it would create the conflict. World War III, sparked by a conflict between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The letter claims this war will be conducted in such a way that both sides mutually destroy each other, while the rest of the world is forced into a state of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. Guys, you see the prices of gas. Do you realize they're having to import a lot of food now airlifted into the Middle East? Because they were getting 80% imports of food through the straits, and now we're into 23, 24 days, and now they're airlifting food in there. But it's going to affect the entire world because of the natural gas and the fertilizer, and it's planting season throughout the northern hemisphere as we speak. Now, again, complete physical. Okay, we've got that. Everybody's using up all of their munitions, armies getting tired, equipment's wearing out. Moral, spiritual. What about the spiritual aspects of it? Guys, do you believe that the last half dozen videos or so that I've done is so that you would not get this spiritual exhaustion? When you saw the real Israel, when you saw the real Roman influence into our New Testament and the speeches against Jesus by the Roman rhino, and to get you guys that listen, you're not going to be forced into the spiritual part of this. And what does that do? It says, according to the text, the final result of this global exhaustion would be a social cataclysm where disillusioned citizens would reject both Christianity and atheism. Why would you reject Christianity? Because you've been believing in a false system, in a system where the Christians are sending money overseas to the people that hate Christians. Who killed Christ? They reject both Christianity and atheism. That won't work. Why? Because the beast system, the Antichrist system, wants you to worship him. Anyway, they would then receive what the letter calls the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, eventually leading to a single world government, the reset. That's what all of this is about. And again, guys, talking about the rejecting Christianity, everything you thought you believed was a lie. You guys that were starting to realize that half of the New Testament was written by Rome and was against Jesus, you're a step ahead. For you guys that realize what Israel has done, not the Jewish people, but the ones that claim to be, but are the synagogue of Satan, that are dropping bombs right now. Now that you are realizing that, you're opening your eyes, you're not going to be disillusioned. And this goes on to say, without compass, because you have compass. Now you know what Christ really called our Father in heaven, what they were trying to do, and why they crucified Christ for teaching that, and what's going on right now. And you're being called an anti-Semite because you don't believe in the lies anymore. So you're a step ahead. You are one of the elect. And now they're saying that military analysts are seeing the Albert Pike parallels, specifically the concept of mutual destructive chain reaction, playing out through several key strategic developments as the war enters its fourth week. Guys, again, they know it. It's called the mutual destruction cycle. Analysts from groups like ISW and CSIS highlight an eye for an eye escalation pattern that mirrors the letter's description of Zionism and Islam again destroying one another. They're targeting essential life support. After a U.S. strike on a desalination plant, Iran retaliated by targeting one in Bahrain. Since 99% of drinking water in countries like Kuwait and Qatar come from these plants, this marks a shift toward a humanitarian catastrophe that could leave the region's population physically exhausted. Now, look at the economic and global exhaustion, again going back to the letter and current events. It says the letter's prediction of global economic ruin is reflected in the current energy and trade crisis. The Hormuz blockade, the closure, has removed 20 million barrels of oil and 20% of global natural gas from the market. This triggered a $3.2 trillion loss in global equity value in 96 hours. Global grocery supply emergency. Because of the Gulf states rely on the Strait for 80% of their food, prices for staples have spiked 40 to 120%, forcing massive airlifts of food supplies. You're not going to hear that on mainstream, guys. They do not want to show you how this conflict, how dangerous it is and how quickly it can spread. Also, aviation collapses, not counting the crap going on now, but near total airspace closure has grounded thousands of flights, causing disruption only surpassed by the COVID-19 pandemic so far. Now, they're saying that this could be because of failed assumptions. report that U.S. and Israeli officials expected a mass uprising in Iran to topple the regime quickly, but that internal destabilization has not materialized as planned. And again, it's hard to do it when you've got two people calling the strikes, both supposedly on the same side, and I'm talking about Israel and the U.S. And guys, if Trump pulls out now, you will see mutual destruction from both sides. Israel won't go down quietly, neither will Iran. Now, a little bit more of an update on this food deal. It says the crisis is most acute in the Gulf Cooperation Council, called the GCC states, which rely on the strait, again, for 80% of their caloric intake. Supply collapsed by mid-March. 70% of the region's food imports were disrupted. This is March 23rd. Prices have spiked because consumer prices for staples have surged between 40 and 120% again. And emergency measures, major retailers like Lulu Retail have been forced to airlift basic goods to prevent total depletion of shelves. Again, economic ruin, economic tiredness, exhaustion. And going back to the fertilizer, guys, it's the world's primary choke point for nitrogen-based fertilizers. The traps supply approximately 35% of the world's seaborne urea and phosphate is currently trapped in the Persian Gulf. 35%. Spring planting crisis. This disruption coincides with a critical spring planting window in the Northern Hemisphere, and the cost for farmers has jumped from $40 to $60 per acre just to plant crops. Prices for urea have spiked $500 per ton, while ammonia has breached the $900 per ton mark. What does that cause, guys? They have to plant acreage that's different, something that doesn't use as much nitrogen or ammonia. And what you do, you get much less protein. When you change from corn to soybeans, things like that, the entire population suffers. Guys, and they're expecting this to hit home pretty quick. They're saying this is the expected grocery impact in the U.S. and the West. While local store shelves currently have about 2 to 3 weeks of buffer supply, experts warn of significant price shocks in the coming weeks and months. The imminent hikes. Analysts at B&M Bloomberg and CNN predict prices for produce, meat, and dairy will spike fast as increased costs for fuel and fertilizer reach the register. Some farmers are already pivoting from nitrogen-intense crops like corn to soybeans and to manage cost, which could lead to a secondary protein crisis and higher livestock feed prices by late this year. The logistics costs, surging diesel prices exceed $5 a gallon in some regions and are directly increasing the cost of refrigerator transport and processing. The entire world is about to be hit, and this reset is about to happen. I'm not going to do a commercial here about survival foods and all of that. You know we have the best that you can get on our website. And if there was ever a time you needed them, it would be now. But I'm not going to go into detail on that because that's not what this is about. But if you're smart, think about it. If you don't already have stocks, think about it, because the reason we started 12 or 15 years ago carrying the survival food was for a time like this. And it's 20 to 30 year shelf life. So the guys, if you bought it that long ago and continuing into now, it's still good. But think about it, guys, in that way only. And I'm not trying to get you to buy anything. That's not the purpose of this video, I promise you. I didn't even think about it until now, reading this. And so, again, guys, we are on the verge of possibly World War III. Now, when we look at a couple of events in history, like the Albert Pike letter, then coming up into the UN, moving into Israel in 47, you really have to go back further than that. Gog and Magog. How long has the synagogue of Satan and the Illuminati worked hand in hand to plan and project the world into what they think is the right model? We're seeing it now. The players are in place, Everything's in place. What I do expect, I may be wrong, is that Trump is about to pull out and let it happen what's going to happen because of pressure here at home and because Israel is not listening. He, again, didn't want them to bomb the SARS field. He wanted to stop the infrastructure destruction for 5 days. Just like I said this morning, the demons in Israel will not have peace. We're watching this, guys. You watch it. This is important. Look into it for yourself. I'm trying to make it make sense. Sometimes it's hard to do. But again, we are watching it. You guys pay very close attention to it and subscribe and thumbs up. It's a heads up. Be safe.